A blind beggar touched the king's hand, and called him by a name no living person knew. The king froze. His guards reached for their spears, because that name had died 30 years ago, buried in a secret the palace had sworn to carry to the grave. The old man smiled. His empty eyes saw nothing, and yet he saw everything. Then he whispered 4 words that made the most powerful man in the kingdom fall to his knees in the dust. Who was this man? And what did he know? The marketplace of Asante was loud that morning. The smell of roasting groundnuts hung thick in the air. Women called out prices. Children chased goats between the stalls. Drums tapped lazily from somewhere deep in the crowd, the rhythm slow and old, like a heartbeat that had been beating since before anyone could remember. King Marcus walked among his people in silence. He did this sometimes. Without his crown, without his guards, standing close, just a man in plain cloth, moving between the stalls, listening to what his kingdom truly sounded like when it did not know he was watching. It was the one thing his advisors hated. It was the one thing he refused to stop doing. It was 34 years old. He had ruled for 9 years, and on this morning, something in the air felt different. Heavy, electric, the way the sky feels before a great storm arrives. He almost walked past the old man without looking. Almost. The beggar sat at the edge of the market, just where the shade of the great Baobab tree met the open dust. His legs were folded beneath him. His bowl was empty. His clothes were faded to a color that had once been something, perhaps green, perhaps blue, but now was simply the color of time. He was old, deeply old, the kind of old that lives in the bones, in the slow, careful way a man breathes, in the lines that are not just age but story. His eyes were white, clouded over completely. Blind since when? The king did not know. No one knew. Marcus would have kept walking, but the old man turned his head, directly toward Marcus, as though he could see him, as though he had been waiting for him. "Child of the forgotten river," the old man said. His voice was soft, steady, like a man reading from a text he had memorized long ago. "You carry your father's sorrow in your left hand, and you do not even know it." Marcus stopped. The words hit him somewhere in the chest that had no name. Child of the forgotten river? That was not a title. That was not a blessing people gave to strangers in the market. That was something else. In Tayaled, that was a name. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story, and tell us from where you are watching from. Now, let us go deeper. To understand what those words meant to King Marcus, you must understand what kind of man he was, and what kind of wound he had been carrying since he was 5 years old. Marcus had been crowned at the age of 20. After the sudden death of the king before him, his guardian, his uncle, the man who had raised him inside the great palace walls since Marcus was just a boy too small to reach the top of the ceremonial drum. His guardian had been kind, strict in the way that good fathers are strict, and when he died, the council of elders had placed the royal cloth across Marcus's shoulders with solemn ceremony, and told him he was ready. Marcus had never been sure they were right. Everyone said so. He settled disputes with patience. He built roads to the villages that had been forgotten by every king before him. He listened, truly listened, when the old women came to him with complaints about the harvest, about the wells, about the children going hungry. His people loved him for this, called him Marcus the Just, Marcus the Steady. But inside the palace, behind the polished walls and the burning torches, there was a room Marcus had never entered. His father's room. It had been sealed for 30 years, by order of his grandmother, the Queen Mother Constance. Sharp-eyed, straight-backed, cold as polished iron, even in her old age. She ruled nothing officially. She ruled everything actually. The advisors feared her. The servants walked quietly near her chambers, and from the time Marcus was a child, she had told him the same thing every time he asked about his father. "Your father left," she said, always with that same flat voice, always looking just past him at the wall, as though the conversation was already over. "He abandoned this family. You will not speak of him again." Marcus had learned, eventually, to stop asking. But he had never stopped wondering, because there was one thing Constance had never been able to erase, one memory Marcus carried from his earliest childhood, so old it might have been a dream, except it was too warm to be a dream. A man's large hands, a deep voice that smelled of cedar wood and earth, the word river, spoken like it meant something sacred. And then nothing. The memory ended there, like a story with its last pages torn out. Child of the forgotten river. No one used that phrase, no one leaving. Marcus turned back toward the old blind man. The beggar's name was Joseph. He had lived at the edge of the Asante market for longer than most traders could remember. He arrived each morning before the sun was fully up, before the first stall was opened, and he sat beneath the Baobab tree and he waited. Some people gave him food. Some gave him coin. Many walked past him without looking. He never asked. He never called out for charity. He simply sat, and sometimes he spoke small, careful observations that most people ignored, that occasionally made someone stop, stare at him, and walk away quickly with the expression of a person who had heard something they did not want to examine too closely. The children of the market liked him. They sat near him sometimes, and he told them stories. His stories always ended the same way, with someone finding what they had lost. The children thought this was just how stories went. The older people in the market thought it was something else, something they did not have a word for. Joseph was not young. He was not healthy. The skin over his hands was papery and thin. He moved slowly, carefully, every motion deliberate, every gesture conserved. The way a man moves when he knows that energy is precious and must not be wasted on anything that does not matter. But when he spoke, his voice carried. When he turned his sightless face towards you, it felt impossibly like being seen. Marcus crouched down, eye level with the old man, the way you crouch before an elder you want to address honestly. "How do you know that name?" he said. Quietly, not a command. Something closer to a plea. Joseph did not flinch. He tilted his head slightly, the way a bird listens for water underground. "I know many names," Joseph said. "Most of them were taken from the people they belonged to. That one was taken too soon." "What does it mean?" Marcus asked. Joseph was quiet for a moment. The noise of the market continued around them. The shouting, the laughing, the rolling of cart-wheels over packed earth. But between these two men, in this small circle of shade, everything was still. "It means," Joseph said slowly, "that you were born during a night when the river behind the eastern palace overflowed its banks. It means the women who attended your birth said the water came right up to the palace steps, as if it was trying to reach you. It means your father gave you that name in the dark, before any ceremony, before any announcement. Just him and you, and the sound of water. It was his private name for you. His true name." Time stopped. The world stopped. Everything stopped. Marcus stood slowly. His legs felt unsteady beneath him, a thing that had not happened since he was a child. He looked at this old blind man, and something moved deep inside his chest. Something enormous, something he had spent 29 years learning not to touch. "Who told you that?" Marcus said. His voice came out rough. "No one told me," Joseph said simply. "I was there." Marcus looked around the marketplace. The guards he had left at the gate were too far away to hear any of this. The traders nearby were busy with their own business. No one was watching. No one was listening. He looked back at Joseph. "Come with me," Marcus said. Joseph shook his head. Gently. "Not yet," he said. "You are not ready yet. Come back tomorrow. Come alone, and bring the question you are most afraid to ask." Marcus walked back to the palace with a mind that would not be still. He ate his evening meal without tasting it. He dismissed his advisors early. He sat in his private courtyard in the cool dark and stared at the stars until they blurred, listening to the distant sound of the river, the eastern river, the one that ran just behind the old quarters of the palace, the one that had been there before his grandfather's grandfather drew the first boundary stone, the one that overflowed the night he was born. He had known this. Constance had told him once, years ago, in a rare moment of unguarded speech, a detail she had immediately regretted sharing, because his eyes had lit up with questions she didn't want to answer, and she had shut the conversation down with a coldness that froze the room. That beggar knew. How did a blind old man sitting in a marketplace know the private name a father had given his son in the dark of a night 30 years ago? There was only one answer Marcus could form, and it was an answer so large, so impossibly, that he put it aside like a stone too heavy to lift. He would go back tomorrow. He would ask the question he was most afraid to ask. He went back the next morning, and the morning after that. And the morning after that. Each visit lasted longer than the last. He brought food the first time, fresh bread and dried fish wrapped in banana leaf, and Joseph accepted it without ceremony, eating slowly, deliberately, as a man eats who has known real hunger. They talked carefully at first, in circles, the way careful people talk when they are circling something enormous that neither of them has named yet, but piece by piece, like a river gradually washing away the base of a great stone, the truth began to emerge. On the fourth morning, Marcus brought the question. He sat down across from Joseph in the shade of the Baobab. The market was not yet fully awake. The air smelled of dew and wood smoke. A rooster called somewhere in the distance, once, twice, then fell silent. "Are you my father?" Marcus asked. Joseph was still for a long time. Then he said, "What do you know about your father?" "Nothing," Marcus said. "Only what my grandmother told me. That he left, that he abandoned us, that he was dead to the family." He paused. "She never said he was actually dead." "No," Joseph said quietly. "She would not say that." "Because it would be a lie," Marcus said. Joseph turned his face toward Marcus, those white, clouded eyes, empty of sight, full of something else entirely. "Yes," he said. The word fell between them like a stone into deep water. "Tell me," Marcus said. "Tell me everything." And Joseph told him. His name, his full name, was Joseph. He had been king before Marcus. Not his guardian uncle. His father, the true-blood king. Crowned, married to Marcus's mother at 24. Father of a boy he had named, in a private moment beside a flooding river. Child of the forgotten river, because the river that night had seemed to be trying to speak, and Joseph had believed it was his ancestors welcoming his son. He had ruled for 5 years. 5 years of a reign the historians now did not record, because history had been rewritten by the woman who came after him, his own mother, Constance. "She did not want you on the throne," Marcus said slowly. He was working it out as he spoke, each piece falling into place with the sick inevitability of a story you can feel the end of before you reach it. "She wanted someone she could control." "Your uncle was her choice," Joseph said. "He was younger. He was afraid of her. He would do as he was told." He paused. "I would not." "What did she do?" Marcus asked. His voice was very quiet now. Joseph's hands rested on his knees. Still, controlled, the hands of a man who had long ago made peace with something terrible. "She accused me of a crime I did not commit," he said. "She brought witnesses, men she had paid, men she had threatened. She brought evidence that had been manufactured by careful hands in the middle of the night. She had me stripped of my title, stripped of my name, stripped of my place in the records." He touched the edge of his clouded left eye, gently, almost absently. "And she had this done, so that even if I returned, even if anyone listened to me, I could not identify my accusers. I could not point to a face." Silence. The sound of the market beginning to wake. The first cartwheels on hard earth. The first voices calling, "Good morning." "She blinded you," Marcus said. "Yes. And then she sent you away. She gave me 2 men who were paid to take me far into the bush and leave me," Joseph said. "They were decent men, more decent than she knew when she chose them. They did not leave me to die. They brought me to a village, 3 days, walk from Erin. I was there for many years, learning to live without sight, learning to find my way." He paused. "Learning to wait." "Wait for what?" Marcus asked. Joseph smiled, the first full smile Marcus had seen on his face. Warm, certain, like a man who had known the answer to a question for a very long time. "For you to be ready," Joseph said. Marcus went back to the palace that evening with his mind burning. He did not go to Constance, not yet. He was not ready yet. Joseph was right about that. He needed evidence. Evidence, the kind that could not be dismissed, could not be explained away, could not be buried again by a woman who had spent 30 years making sure this story stayed dead. He called his most trusted advisor, a man named Samuel, who had served the palace since before Marcus was born, who had outlasted 3 kings through the simple virtue of being honest and keeping careful records. "Samuel," Marcus said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth, even if you believe the truth will hurt me." Samuel looked at him steadily. He was 60 years old. He had the face of a man who had seen enough to not be easily surprised. "Ask," he said. "Before my uncle, before the man who raised me, was there another king?" Samuel did not answer immediately. He was quiet for so long that Marcus thought he might refuse entirely. Then something shifted in the old man's face. Something like relief. The relief of a man who has been holding a secret so long that the weight of it has become indistinguishable from the weight of his own body, and he had forgotten what it felt like to not carry it. "Yes," Samuel said. "There was. His name," Marcus said. "Joseph Asantiquan." "What happened to him?" Samuel looked at the floor. Then back at Marcus. "He was accused of stealing from the royal treasury. The evidence was presented by the Queen Mother herself. The council? They were afraid of her. They always were. They voted to strip him." He paused. "He was taken away. No one ever learned where." "Did you believe the accusation?" Marcus said. "No," Samuel said, without hesitation. "No, I never believed it." "Why not?" "Because the day before the accusation was made," Samuel said slowly, "I saw Constance speaking with the 3 witnesses in the inner courtyard, late at night, when no one was supposed to be moving through the palace. And when I asked her the next morning what the meeting had been about," he stopped. "What did she say?" Marcus asked. "She looked at me," Samuel said. "And she smiled. And she said, 'Nothing that concerns you, old man.' And I was afraid. So I said nothing." He closed his eyes. "I have never forgiven myself." Samuel, emboldened by finally speaking the truth, went quietly to the oldest records room in the palace, a low stone building near the eastern wall that no one visited anymore, that smelled of dust and age and old tallow candles. He had a key because he had always had a key. He had simply never allowed himself to use it for this purpose. He brought Marcus a leather-bound registry book. Old a cover, worn smooth. Inside, on a page that someone had tried to cut out, cut carefully, with a sharp blade, but had not cut cleanly enough, a half-page remained. And on that half-page, in old ceremonial ink, were these words: "On this day, the son of Joseph Asantiquan and his wife Atwoa was born in the eastern chamber, in the year of the flooding river. Named in ceremony, Marcus, named in truth, by his father's voice alone. Child of the forgotten river." Marcus held the page for a long time. His hands did not shake. He was surprised by that. He had thought they would. But his hands were steady and his mind was clear and quiet, the way a sky goes clear and quiet in the moment just after a great storm has passed, when the air is clean and sharp and everything is very still and very certain. He knew what he had to do. But first, a complication he had not anticipated. That evening, Constance sent for him. She did not know what he had discovered. She could not have known. But she was old and she was sharp, and she had been reading the palace like a weather instrument for 30 years. And something in the atmosphere had changed around Marcus in the past week, and she had felt it. He went to her chambers. She was seated by the window, as she always was. Straight-backed eyes, precise, dressed in deep burgundy cloth, her neck bearing the ceremonial gold she never removed. "You have been going to the market," she said. "Not a question. I go to the market often," Marcus said. "You have been going to the same spot," she said. "Every morning, early, before your duties begin." She looked at him with those sharp reading eyes. "What is at that spot?" "Marcus," he almost told her. He felt the words rise up in his throat like water reaching a flood point. But he pressed them back down. Not yet. Not here. Not without everything he needed. A man who tells good stories, Marcus said. Constance studied him, the way she had always studied him, as though she were looking for the crack in a wall she knew was there but couldn't yet find. Be careful, she said, of old men with good stories. They are often selling something. What would a blind beggar have to sell? Marcus said. Something moved in Constance's face, a flicker, gone in an instant. But Marcus saw it. He had been watching her face his whole life. He saw it. Fear. 3 days later, Marcus was ready. He had everything. The page from the registry, Samuel's testimony, written out in formal language and sealed with Samuel's mark, and one more thing. The final piece that had fallen into place that morning when a very old palace servant named Ruth, who had been in this palace since before Constance was married into it, had come to Marcus's chambers with the trembling courage of a woman who had been waiting 30 years for someone to ask the right question. Ruth had been there the night Joseph was taken away. She had seen the men. She had seen Constance pay them from a small cedar box she kept under her sleeping mat. And she had seen this was the part that stopped Marcus's breath entirely. Constance hold up a piece of folded cloth before the men left. Instructions? Written out. She had handed it to the leader of the men and said, in a voice so controlled it was worse than shouting, "Make sure he cannot find his way back." Ruth had said nothing for 30 years. Why now? Marcus had asked her. Because, Ruth said, her old voice barely above a whisper, I heard you ask Samuel about the old king, and I thought, finally, someone is brave enough. She looked at him. And because I am old, my king, I do not have many mornings left to make things right. Marcus went to Constance in the formal receiving room. He brought Samuel. He brought the registry page. He brought Ruth's written testimony. He did not bring guards. He did not need them. The battlefield he had chosen was not one that required spears. Constance saw his face when he entered the room, and she understood immediately that this was not a normal morning. She rose from her chair, a rare thing, and stood straight and tall, and watched him come toward her with the stillness of a woman who had controlled things for so long she did not know how to do anything other than stand her ground. "Sit down, Marcus," she said. Authority in every syllable, the voice that had silenced rooms, stopped arguments, ended conversations before they began. "No," Marcus said. Constance's eyes narrowed. This was new. He had never said that to her before. In 9 years of being king, in 30 years of being her grandson, he had never looked at her like this. "I have found my father," he said. Constance said nothing. "He is alive," Marcus said. "He has been living at the edge of our market for years. Blind, alone. In a beggar's bowl." His voice was controlled. He had practiced this. He needed it to be controlled because if it wasn't, the grief in it would swallow the justice, and the justice was what mattered right now. "I have spoken with him. I know what you did, and I have evidence." "You have nothing," Constance said. Flat, fast. A reflex. Marcus placed the registry page on the table between them. She looked at it. Something moved through her face, swiftly, violently, like a current under a smooth surface. "Old records are unreliable," she said. Marcus placed Samuel's testimony beside the page. Her jaw tightened. Samuel is an old man who has always harbored. Marcus placed Ruth's testimony on top of both. Constance went silent. The room was very quiet. Morning light came through the high window and fell across the table and the 3 pieces of paper, and the 2 people standing on either side of them like 2 sides of a war that had been fought underground for 30 years and was only now rising to the surface. "Why?" Marcus said. She looked at him. "Not how," he said. "I understand how. I want to know why. He was your son." Something cracked in Constance's composure then. Just for a moment. Just a hairline fracture. And through it something came. Not quite remorse. Not yet. But something raw and old and painful. "He was going to ruin everything," she said. Her voice was lower now. The authority's still there, but beneath it something else. He was too soft. too ready to give things away. He was going to reduce the royal treasury to nothing with his roads and his wells and his she. Stopped, swallowed. This family built something over 3 generations. I was not going to watch one soft-hearted boy tear it down because he wanted to be loved by common people. Marcus looked at her for a long time. "You blinded your own son," he said quietly. "You threw him out like refuse. You raised me on a lie. You let me grow up thinking I had no father. You took 30 years of my life, and 30 years of his, and you put them in the dark because you were afraid of generosity." Constance said nothing. "You told me," Marcus said, "every time I built a road, every time I dug a well, every time I gave something back to the people of this kingdom, you told me I was being reckless. You told me a king must be firm mushtol back, must protect what the family has accumulated." He paused. "Now I understand why." He looked at her with clear, steady eyes. "You were not protecting the kingdom. You were protecting your mistake. Every good thing I did reminded you of what you destroyed in him, and you could not bear it." Friends, if this story is moving you, subscribe now and click the bell. The ending will change how you see everything. The Council of Elders was convened 3 days later. Marcus had spent those 3 days carefully. He had visited Joseph each morning. He had told him, piece by piece, what had been found, what was about to happen. Joseph had listened in the way he listened to everything, with great stillness and a quality of attention that felt like weather. And when Marcus finished, Joseph had reached out and found Marcus's hand and held it for a moment without speaking. "I am not angry," Joseph had said at last. "You have every right to be," Marcus said. "I know," Joseph said, "but anger is a fire that needs feeding. I am old, and I am tired, and I have spent 30 years feeding other fires. The fire of staying alive, the fire of remaining human, the fire of hoping you would come." He squeezed Marcus's hand. "I am done feeding fire. I want to sit in the warmth." At the council meeting, Marcus stood before the 12 elders and the assembled nobles of the kingdom, and he spoke. He spoke for a long time. He laid out the evidence. He read Samuel's testimony aloud. He read Ruth's testimony aloud. He held up the registry page and spoke the words on it slowly, so that every person in the room could hear. "Named in truth, by his father's voice alone, child of the forgotten river." And then he brought Joseph in. Joseph walked slowly, guided by one of Marcus's most trusted young guards. He moved the way he always moved, carefully, deliberately, every step placed with intention. He wore new cloth, clean, dark green, the color of deep forest day. He had been given food and a proper place to sleep for 3 days. He walked to the center of the great hall. He stopped. He stood straight. He could not see the 12 elders staring at him. He could not see the nobles with their hands over their mouths. He could not see the tears on Samuel's face, or the rigid, stone-still posture of Constance at the far wall, standing alone, because no one had moved to stand near her. But he could feel the room. "My name," Joseph said, in a voice that carried to every wall and every corner of that great hall, "is Yosef Asantequan. I was king of this people for 5 years. I am the father of the man who stands before you now." He paused. "I am not here for my throne. I am not here for my title. I am here because my son asked me to stand in the light, and I have been in the dark long enough." The council deliberated for 2 hours. They did not need 2 hours. The evidence was clear. The testimonies were clear. But they were men who understood the weight of what they were about to do, and they gave that weight its proper time. They came back with a decision in 3 parts. First, the official historical record of the kingdom was to be corrected. Yosef Asantequan was to be reinstated in the chronicles as the rightful king, his 5-year reign restored to history, his name returned to the line of kings. Second, Constance was formally stripped of her title as Queen Mother. She was to leave the palace and live under the supervision of distant family, with all her official power dissolved. She would not be imprisoned. Marcus had asked for this mercy. She was old. She had done a terrible thing, but she was also his grandmother, and there was something in Joseph That quality of wanting warmth rather than fire that Marcus found he had inherited. Third, compensation, in whatever form was possible, was to be made to Joseph for the years taken from him. When the decision was read aloud, Samuel put his face in his hands. Ruth, standing near the door, clasped her hands and looked up at the ceiling with an expression that was something between prayer and gratitude and exhaustion, the expression of a woman who has been carrying a stone for 30 years and has finally been allowed to put it down. And Marcus King, Marcus the Just, Marcus the Steady, walked across the great hall to where his father stood. He took Joseph's hands in both of his. Joseph's face was turned toward him. Those white, clouded eyes that could not see but always seemed to see something deeper than vision. And on his face was the expression of a man who had waited 30 years for something, not the throne, not the title, not the vindication, but simply this, simply his son's hands in his, simply being found. "I am sorry," Marcus said. "I am sorry it took me so long." Joseph shook his head slowly. His voice, when he spoke, was thick. "You found me," he said. "That is all I ever needed. You found me." The hall was completely silent. Outside, through the high windows, the sound of the eastern river carried faintly on the morning air. Deep, unhurried, continuous, the same river that had flooded its banks the night Marcus was born. The same river that had spoken to Joseph in the dark, that had made him give his son a name that carried a whole life's worth of meaning. Still flowing, still speaking, after all this time, still there. 1 year passed. The palace changed, in the way that places change when a long-held wrong is finally corrected quietly. Gradually, the way a room brightens when you remove something that was blocking the window. People moved differently through the corridors. Voices were lighter, even the air seemed to move more freely. Joseph did not move into the palace. He had been offered chambers, generous, warm, well-furnished rooms in the eastern wing, looking out over the river. He had declined, gently, with a smile. "I have learned to live simply," he told Marcus. "I am too old to unlearn it." He lived instead in a small, well-built house near the eastern gate of the city, surrounded by a garden that Marcus's people planted and maintained with quiet devotion. Clean water, good food, a bed that was soft, company whenever he wanted it. The children of the neighborhood came to sit with him in the afternoons, the same way children had always gathered near him, drawn by the warmth of someone who had suffered deeply and emerged without bitterness. He told them stories, stories that always ended the same way, with someone finding what they had lost. Now the older people understood why. Samuel retired from his official duties, but continued to visit the palace most mornings, to drink tea with Marcus and talk through the business of the kingdom in the unhurried way of two people who have gone through something significant, together and come out the other side with a friendship that has been tested and held. He was lighter than he had been in years. The relief had done something good to him. It showed in his face. Ruth, who had spent 30 years as a silent palace servant, was given a comfortable retirement and the official recognition of the council for her courage in stepping forward. She wept when the announcement was made. Then she laughed. Then she went home to her family and told them the whole story, from beginning to end. Constance lived quietly in the house of a cousin, in a village 2 days' travel away. Marcus sent food to her household. He did not visit. He was not yet ready for that, but he sent food because he was his father's son, and his father had taught him without a single lesson, simply by being what he was, that mercy is not weakness. Mercy is the decision to not become what hurt you. Once a week, on the morning when the market was at its most alive, Marcus walked through the stalls in plain cloth the way he always had, and on his way he always stopped at the great Baobab tree at the edge of the market. Not to sit with a blind beggar. There was no blind beggar there any more. But he stopped anyway. He stood in the shade of that ancient tree, in the exact spot where a white-eyed old man had turned his head and said, "Child of the forgotten river, you carry your father's sorrow in your left hand, and you do not even know it." And Marcus would stand there for a moment, breathing, listening to the market, to the drums, to the distant sound of the river, feeling the shade on his face and the memory of everything that had changed in the year since he almost walked past a beggar without looking. Then he would go on. Back to his duties, back to his roads and his wells and the endless patient work of a man who loves his people. Heavier in history, lighter in his heart. His father had named him for a river that would not be forgotten. He was finally beginning to understand what the name meant. And that, friends, is the story of a king who almost walked past the greatest truth of his life, and the blind man who had been waiting, with the patience of rivers and the faith of ancestors. For the moment, his son was finally ready to see. A man can have a throne and still be lost. A man can be blind and still see clearly the things that matter most, and the truth. No matter how long it is buried, no matter how many records are cut out and how many voices are silenced, the truth finds a way to sit quietly in the marketplace, under the shade of a baobab tree, and wait. It always waits, because the truth has nowhere it needs to be. It has all the time in the world, and love that is real. Love that has survived blindness and exile and 30 years of silence. That love does not die, it simply waits, with an empty bowl and white eyes and a name on its lips, for the child it has been missing. Until that child comes home, thank you, dear friends, for joining us for this story. If it moved something in you, if it reminded you to look closely at the people you almost walked past, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you never miss a story. Every story we tell is a light in the dark. Share this one with someone who needs to find what they have lost. And watch our next story. It is waiting for you right here.